Go ahead and go live.
Come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today. So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready. Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Well, hello. Welcome back to our Ocean studio. And we have a guest co-host here, and Roger Bankston joining Kevin and I as we try to work around the Wookiee here and do our ongoing vlog on the daily. So welcome, Roger. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Craig and Kevin. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. This is your second with us, and we'll do many more now, particularly since we're doing this on the daily basis. To jump right in, what we're presenting here is the vlog from a Facebook feed. So I have a Facebook account that I use for no other reason than to feed this particular show with things that I think might be interesting. It also feeds the blog on the Yahowah.com website that we can engage in and keep current with the news. And so our intent is to talk about the various things that have been presented on the Facebook feed, so that we can just keep current with what the weirdos are doing in religion and rebuke it, and also talk about what's going wrong in the news and also rebuke that. So we begin here with the Word of God in Proverbs 14. And I listened to this, and this numbskull is citing Proverbs 14, but I recall that in being Ethan Hajraki, I wrote it. And self-indulgent here, I wrote it about me. It's about the Choder. This is Chokma Choder. And, never once did I mention a Lord. Never once did I said that fear is the answer. It's all about wisdom. And to say the Lord is secure in confidence. Say what? Is that you mean your God is secure because he's confident? You're not able to think it through. No, the Chokma Choder presentation is there because we're trying to convey the importance of wisdom. And you can be confident and you can be secure when you are particularly wise. And to be wise, you have to study Yahweh's testimony, know what he said, and then make the connections to understand it. And then act upon, of course, what he has conveyed. But not so much. They want their God to be secure and confident. I guess you'd have to understand that from a Christian point of view. After their God's no bigger than a man. And men can kill their God, so their God ought to be worried.
Yeah, he's a little sore after that last bout with humankind, isn't he? So he's
yeah, I guess. I've always wondered.
I was wondering
how could you have a religion of 2.5 billion people, where the God is no bigger than a man, where the God is killed by men, where the God's solution to being killed by men is bodily resurrection, which I thought went out with the Egyptians. I thought they were the last to buy into that stupidity. And all you have to do is look at the mummies. Guess what? Even with elaborate preparation, it didn't work.
They don't look so good, do they?
No, and your lead guy, the guy that wrote the first 14 books of your Bible, that fellow admitted that he was demon possessed, and he never found a single rational fallacy that he couldn't incorporate into his letters. He got them all.
Well, it sounds like it's something written by men for men to enslave men.
Correct. That was the purpose. And to aggrandize certain men. And it actually backfired on Paul. He was hated by the time that he died in 66 CE. alone in Rome. Everybody had abandoned him because those who knew him realized that he was a complete fraud. And that's what happens.
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned this being a bit self-indulgent. I said, is this a essentially a post-it note on the refrigerator to yourself, written by Ethan Hazaraki about a choder? Hey, don't forget to do this choder thing when you come back as Yada. Is that what this the 14th Mashal is?
Yeah, it's it's a lot of things changed when we learned about Ethan Hazaraki and the delivery of the 89th Mizmor and the purpose of it. Prior to that time, I had assumed that since the Mashal, these proverbs, were really well written. They describe life in the covenant. They describe a relationship between father and son, mother and daughter, and a covenant kind of family relationship. And I had wrongly assumed that because they were astutely written, that they must be written by Dode. But I should have been smarter than that. You know what should have been my first clue? That the Proverbs could not have been written by Dode, and most certainly could not have been written by Solomon. What was the first clue? I missed it.
They were written as
I had to keep my day job. I know it. I've never shared this before, but there is something that is absolutely obvious as to why Dode could not have written those Mashal. And I've already given you the answer. All right. What is the entire thrust? What if you start with the first Mashal and you go to the last, what is the theme of them? All of them.
Wisdom passed from father to son. No?
They're not all on wisdom, but many are. And Dode could have handled wisdom. They're all family oriented. They're all the relationship between a father and son, a mother and her daughter, and it is all about life within a family where the mother and father are doing as one would hope in terms of raising children. So it's family advice as to how to live if you're going to raise children properly. Dode's mother, he called his mother a whore. His father was a jerk who had abandoned him. In that life, Dode knew nothing of this. This was, if you want to know the reason that Dode had such a tough time with women, and he married poorly. Married a lot, but married poorly and didn't get better with practice. And why he made so many mistakes regarding his sons and daughters. And he made horrendous mistakes with his sons and daughters, horrendous mistakes with his wives and girlfriends, is because he had no one in that life to model proper behavior, and wouldn't until the intervention of the Amma and her husband. And so he couldn't write them because this was his weakness, not his strength. So was not Dode as the author. He just didn't have any of the experience. This was the hole in his resume. What do you think about that, Roger?
Well, it makes sense when you look at it from that perspective. It always seemed to me to be familial, talking about family, but it gets such more deeper than that when you look at it really and you take it apart. It just works. I mean, without it, what is there?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, the fact of the matter is there is nothing deeper or more important than family, particularly the family of God, the covenant family. And this is something that Dode became the exemplar of, and he was the one who made the covenant family possible, according to Yahowah. But for most of his life, he was abandoned by his mother, abandoned by his father, had horrible relations with girlfriends and wives, and was a really, really bad father to his children. So this is Dode's weakness, not his strength, and it is what ultimately we have worked to shore up. So it is it's advice that Dode could benefit from, but not give.
Yeah.
What do you got next there? Oh boy,
Koreans in Palestine.
Oh yeah, Korea's in Palestine. So my question is to these Koreans waving the Palestinian flag as Gen Zers, is that where is Palestine?
On the side of the
Where on a
world.
map would you find? You're standing up for this place. You're waving their flag. Where is it? And
The other
by the
side
way,
of the world.
who? Well, no, it's not the other side of the world. There is no such place. Oh, and
Oh,
who
yeah,
are these people you're calling Palestinians? And why are you standing with them and for them? What did they do? Who are they? What did they do? Where are they? Do you have a clue, or is it you're just a moron Marxist and somebody told you this is cool, so you're going to be among the cool kids?
Well, everybody's got to have a YouTube link to get some likes, to get some monetization off of it. This might just be one of those things.
I find it surprising that Koreans typically have been very, very pro-Israel. I mean, it is
Not
this push through Christianity that they were but they, chosen people and everything that Christianity kind of brings up. But historically, Koreans were very pro-Israel, and so this is definitely a shift away from that with more anti-Semitism.
When Koreans went from Asian religions to Christianity, the Christianity that Koreans followed were false messiahs, Reverend Moon and the like. That it's a whole series of crazies in Korea. And so Korea happens to be the most prone nation, probably on earth, to accepting false messiahs and absolute dunderheads as Christian influencers. And of course, the religion of Christianity is born anti-Semitic. The entire function of Christianity is to blame Jews for killing their God. And so it exists to demean them. Without Christianity, anti-Semitism wouldn't exist today. And there would be no reason to wave that flag, which is not saying that I am for the Fakistinians because they don't exist. I'm not for Fakistan because it doesn't exist and never has. It says I'm anti-Jewish, and that's cool today.
Yeah.
Well, this Palestinian movement thing is just sweeping the world. It's going everywhere, and everybody's got to get on the bandwagon to wave their flag. And I'm not sure they even understand what's going on over there. They're too far removed.
It's one of the most popular lies ever sold. It's not the all-time greatest lie ever sold, but it's certainly in the top 5. The Marxist Muslim propaganda of Palestine and Palestinian. It was all contrived in the 1960s. It was based upon an anti-Semitic slur of Hadrian back in 133 CE. Hadrian is the one who tried to rename the Roman province of Yahowah as Syria Palestina for no other purpose than to demean Jews that he despised and that he was slaughtering. So it's a genocidal slur. It was unfortunately picked up by the British, who were vile and have always been anti-Semitic, and preserved by the British. And it was dusted off by the KGB and the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1960s and perpetrated as a preposterous lie. But it's been so disseminated around the world that you find even Jewish politicians and Jewish media sources parroting the same lie, talking about Palestine and Palestinians. And so long as you're going to talk about mythical people, you've got nothing to say.
Yeah, it's a new invention for the Israelis for sure. You never heard Golda Meir say the word Palestinian or Palestinian people,
Yeah. She didn't. The fact is that she was also wrong. She blamed everything on Arab, and her problem was Muslim, and she was incapable of saying that. So Golda Meir was wrong in a different way.
Well, if you keep repeating a lie over and over and over and over and over again, the weak-minded are going to believe it eventually.
Well, particularly with AI today and social media, lies are go around the world 1,000 times before the truth gets its pants on.
Speaking
oh
of
boy!
Lies and stupid,
Oh boy! This one. This guy here has a fairy tale about what's the difference between a rabbi and a rebbe. A rebbe and a rabbi, it's different pronunciation of the same word. And he's saying that, with the rebbe, that 1,000 people could be listening to him, and everybody that's listening to him thinks he's speaking just to him or her. Just to him. Of course, there are no hers in Judaism. And
Right.
with the rabbi, he can be speaking to 100 people, and the person thinks that he's speaking to the individual sitting next to them. That was his definition. And you're going, oh my God. This is a Fruit Loops religion. I mean, it literally is a Fruit Loops religion. They pretend that they're sages. They pretend that they're wise. They pretend that their Talmud is Torah. They pretend that they're speaking for a Hashem, and they're just in the intellectual gutter. This is so sad. That's why God's so angry. His own people have betrayed him, and you get stupidity like this. And he's not just stupid. What do they always say? It's better to be perceived as or stay quiet and be perceived as stupid than it is to open your mouth and remove all doubt. There you go, pal. That's your sign.
Well, it seems to me that rabbinical Judaism is a religion of squabble. I watched a YouTube not too long ago where a group of rabbis were debating and squabbling over what the Rambam had said about a certain thing. So they're just squabbling constantly among each other.
That is the Talmud. The Talmud is a series of rib arguments. Against the Torah, against Yahowah, in favor of themselves, but also against one another. I mean, the old line in Israel has always been that if you want 1,000 opinions, ask 2 Jews.
Right. Right.
If you want 10,000, ask 2 rabbis, or maybe 1. The Rambam, by the way, was an absolute numbskull. Moses Maimonides got everything wrong. He is the founder of the codification of Judaism. His 13 principles of Judaism are all wrong. His calendar is wrong. His every utterance reeks Islam, which he was a vizier to the Sultan. He is a literal piece of human refuge, and these people believe him. And they also, the father of rabbinic Judaism actually is Rabbi Akiva, and he's the person that caused the diaspora based upon promoting a false Messiah in Bar Kokhba. And that's your religion. I mean, you're going with that, and you're going to go with that against Yahowah? What's wrong with you? I mean, Jews, you've got your head in a gutter. It's just pathetic what you've done to yourselves. And you wonder why the world hates you, and you look like that. Come on. No reason you have to dress up like you're an idiot wearing a skull cap. You're wearing the same damn skull cap the Pope wears. You run around on a Star of David, which is how you were harassed and exterminated. What's wrong with you? God damn, it's just really sick.
The indoctrination is complete. Yeah.
No, it's good. They're literally beyond hope. They say their iniquity is full.
Yeah.
Oh, I played this one this morning. There's the air traffic control, and they're talking to them like the military has air traffic control that's the same as the FAA and ATC. And they said, clear flight level 220, maintain heading of such and such. Oh my God, it's a damn warthog. Do you have any clue what a warthog's function is?
Right.
It works.
Low and slow.
When it scrapes low and slow, it does not fly in combat operations at the flight levels. And, you don't tell a warthog maintain this heading. No. It's close in strafing combat, and it shoots a Gatling gun. What is it? 50 caliber rounds, like a monster.
It's basically a jet engine version of an attack helicopter.
Correct.
Slow flying.
Before the Apache, this is what we had: super slow, super low flying, big damn engines on the back, and it is essentially a gun with wings. It's a machine gun with wings. And the sad thing about this ugly bird is that it was responsible for deaths of more Americans in the Desert Storm than any other weapon. It killed more of them than Islamic terrorists. Every time we deployed one of these in close combat, we killed our own. And then the Defense Department lied and said, no, they were killed honorably in combat. No, we shot our own. We tore them to pieces. This piece of destructive hardware ought to have been thrown away during Desert Storm for killing so many Americans. Yeah. And yet, we still glamorize it. When they tried to deploy a couple of these, when they're trying to rescue Captain Uranium, remember that? We had the downed F-15 pilot that actually was a raid on the uranium storage in Iran. And so I call it the capture of Captain Uranium, which was a complete failure. They sent two of these in and a couple of Navy versions of helicopter gunships. You know how well they did? Well, you can see them and the C-130s because they're all charred and crashed. Yeah. And
right.
Yeah. What the problem that there's a billion problems, but the problem with these aircraft is that because they're only effective low and slow, like the gunship helicopters, like the Apache gunship, the Stinger type missile, whether it's American or Russian or Chinese, is so plentiful and so effective. We're not even able to remember. That's how the U.S. Ran the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan. We hired the Taliban. We gave them Stingers. They shot down the helicopters, and that was the end of the war. And now we're the bait. Now they're returning the favor. Yeah. God, we learned nothing.
This A-10 was built around a gun. They had the Vulcan 50 caliber first, and they said, we need to make this fly.
There you go.
The training it takes to fly one of those things and to deliver the stuff is extensive, and it's quite, how complicated it is to fly an airplane. But with a Stinger, all you need is a trigger finger.
Yes, that's correct. It doesn't take anything. It's a dumb weapon. You can shoot it blind, and it's going to find its target when they're slow and low.
Well, you got to turn it on. You got to be able to turn the Stinger on. That was the first problem with some of the Mujahideen.
Yeah. We had the FBI. The FBI trained the Taliban to fire Stingers, and that was the war that Zygmunt Brzezinski thought would be so smart that we'll give the Soviet Union a taste of what they gave us in Vietnam, and all we have to do is bribe Pakistanis by giving the Pakistanis lots of military weapons. That was really smart, and maybe some knowledge on atomic bomb, which that probably happened in the midst of it. And with that training, we'll teach the Taliban to go kick some Russian behind, and we'll give them all the weapons. Well, guess what? That's where Al-Qaeda came into being, because the United States was actually the entity that named it, because it was the database of Mujahideen that the CIA was training to go kill Ruskies. We created our own monster.
Yep.
And there's the legacy of that monster. Oh my. Have you guys ever listened to either of these? Do you guys either of these two fellows? Do you know who they are?
Yeah, I know Scott Ritter. I don't know the other fellow.
Okay, Glenn Dyson is probably the most erudite of the YouTube talk show hosts. He's a very bright fellow, very articulate fellow, very subdued. I think he is in Oslo, Norway, in that area, but his English is quite good. And he has a series of routine guests that he has on. I watch his show every night. So, it's because my job requires me to stay attuned with the news, and you can't find news on any other. You're not going to find news that you can actually talk intelligently about on Facebook or X or places like that. And I don't watch the mainstream media anymore. So Scott Ritter happens to be a real expert on weapon systems. He knows what's happening in Iran and also Ukraine, for example. That's his powerhouse. He went to Russia and spent a fair amount of time there. When he speaks of what the Russians are doing, He has rubbed shoulders with the top brass of Russian generals. I mean, he's really has honed his craft. But when he came back on this last trip, he came back as a zealot. And he very often gets unhinged. And I don't have a problem with somebody copping an attitude. I think that's appropriate occasionally to cop an attitude. But when you do cop your attitude, it needs to be on something that's vital. Now, in this program, he went off on Donald Trump and said, "You're asking me what I think a malignant narcissist is going to do that is mentally insane." Let's just lay it all on the line here. He is mentally insane, and he's a malignant narcissist. There's a correlation between what he says, what he believes, what he does, and reality. So if your goal is to understand what a malignant narcissist who is literally mentally ill is going to do, then you're wasting your time. Because literally everything that comes out of that man's mouth is deeply disturbed. How about them apples?
Wow.
And this is former Marine intelligence officer. He was one of the guys sent into Iraq to try to verify whether Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And he learned very quickly that the senior brass of the military lies. But he's a man who knows his craft, and he knows, pursuant to what's going on in Ukraine and also what's going on in Iran, the president of the United States is literally deranged.
Yeah.
So, I'd encourage you occasionally listen to Glenn Dyson's show. He has the same cast of characters on routinely, but they're all very well informed, erudite. Yeah, the only thing that's difficult today is that you can't find a single well-informed, rational spokesperson who is an expert on these kinds of subjects who doesn't speak damningly of Israel. They view Israel as right now the most dangerous nation on earth, and Netanyahu as nothing but an unhinged warmonger. Now, I will agree that Netanyahu is an unhinged warmonger, and he has destroyed Israel, and Israel's reputation has been shot around the world. But they overextend Israel's influence with Donald Trump in America. They talk about the Jewish lobby as if it were this grandiose thing. And the fact of the matter is that Jewish lobby is not even in the top 10 funded lobbies in America, not even in the top 10. And you know who the number one is? It's China.
China, man.
China's number one. But Israel's not even in the top 10. So it's just a lie. But in that community, you either play along with them and you're part of the pack, or you don't get to play. And blame Israel is the play. And they're all willing to blame Donald Trump too, and they know he's insane. But this was an interesting listen. I would encourage people to listen to it. It's been posted, I think, on the blog page of Yahowah. It certainly will appeal later today there. Oh my. So here's that guy, it's this whole setup thing. He's playing with his video game or something. And somebody asked him, are men and women equal in Judaism? Now, if you know anything about Judaism, can you answer that question just really simply?
Thank God I'm not a woman. Isn't that the first thing they say?
Yeah, that's how the Orthodox Jews begin a man begins every day. Thank God I'm not a woman. And they won't let women be anywhere near a man. In fact, the Haredim that are willing to join the military won't join the military in any unit where there's a woman. Women are prevented from doing everything. The Talmud says horrid things about women, and that they shouldn't even be allowed to read the Torah. And so women, when they get married, have to shave their heads. A woman can't even get a divorce from a man without the man giving her the right to a divorce.
Yeah.
And so when he asks, oh, this person, he just goes off and talks about, oh, they're the crown of a man's home. They're this cherished and that cherished. If you're going to be part of a misogynist religion, good God, at least own up to it. I mean, Muslims do.
Yeah.
They know that women are property. The Islamic woman, will do everything they can to deny it while they waddle around in their tents. But all religions are misogynist. Islam, for example, wouldn't even exist without misogyny. And Judaism is a horrid religion when it comes to the treatment of women. Horrid. You're going to be religious. Try occasionally to tell the truth. Yes, Roger.
Well, you're basically, if you're a woman, especially a wife in Israel, you're basically imprisoned without bars.
Correct. Yeah. If in Islam, for example, if you're raped, you're the one that gets flogged, not the man who raped you. And in Judaism, essentially, a woman has no rights. They can't even be in proximity to a man. They're sold into marriage. It's a horrible situation. It's not as bad as it is in Islam, but it's still bad. Treatment of women and dogs. That's one of the ways you can tell about a society. This is too dark for me to be able to read it, so I'd have to have you guys tell me what I said and what
Trumpisms have a short shelf life, shelf life, sort of like rotten bananas. This is the one where he's talking about Trump just blinked on the Strait of Hormuz. He's
this
changing course again.
Yeah, this is Trump had a conniption fit about the war and everybody telling him that he couldn't win the war, and he said, "Okay, I won the war." And then every other day he had a speech on how he won the war and gave statistics that had nothing to do with anything that he went in to achieve. We did not get regime change, unless you call going from bad to worse regime change. We did not get a reduction in their missile capability or any commitment that they would not manufacture missiles going forward. And their likelihood of having a nuclear bomb has gone up, has increased radically rather than been diminished. So the U.S. has achieved nothing, and it lost all of its bases throughout the region. They're all destroyed now. And it lost control of the Strait of Hormuz, so that it put the world's economies in a tailspin. And we lost 50% of our precision ordnance and our interceptors in the process, and lost the petrodollar backing. So everything here is a colossal loss, and he wants to say that he's won. And in this particular case, he just 3 days ago announced Project Freedom, where he would be the U.S. would be escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. You know how many escorts we conducted? Zero.
No.
Zero.
We told some ships you ought to come through. We'll give you instructions as to how you come through. And I think there was one that made it through unscathed, and 3 that were attacked. And so it was a colossal failure, like everything else of Trump. So now he's saying, I'm just going to pause it for a while. I'm going to pause it because the Pakistanis asked us to. And we're really close to having an agreement with the Iranians. Yeah.
Well, it's like one side playing chess against someone else, and the other side playing pickup sticks.
Yes.
What
it's so far apart. You know what Yahowah says to those who play pickup sticks? Stone them.
Shmuley the stick guy, not on the not on the Shabbat, or you get stoned.
Yeah, actually, it was uprooting trees, but it fit the story that Roger was telling, so I went with it.
Right.
All right. So what do we have next year?
What the Bible says happens before the tribulation. Only one event must happen.
Okay. Who came up with the term tribulation?
Well, that's got to be Paul. I mean, he was the not rapture. He had a different word, but
right. Yeah, but tribulation for him. Yep. And harposa was his rapture, was his violent snatching away. He said it was going to happen in his lifetime, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he died in 66 CE, and it didn't happen, did it?
Nope.
So wouldn't that make Paul a false prophet?
Yep.
So why did they want to talk about what the Bible says has to happen before the false prophecy that Paul issued? Why would anybody? Why can't you? I mean, it's clear. You can read Thessalonians. It's obvious that Paul said of his harpazo rapture that's going to happen before his tribulation, that he is going to be taken up into the sky, and it didn't happen. So he's a false prophet. Why would anyone believe him?
Well,
Why are
they
Christians
skip
so
over that
fascinated
bit.
with this?
They skip over that bit.
They skip over the bit where he admits he was demon possessed too, in the second letter to Corinth, right?
Mhm.
They skip over the bit that every time that he quotes Yahowah from the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, he actually misquotes him. He didn't quote him accurately once.
That's
They
right.
skip over the part that he claims to speak for imaginary Jesus Christ. There was no Jesus Christ in the first century, and he never cited from the myth that was created after his death, ever once. There's no citation from the Gospels in Paul's letters. Well, that makes sense because the Gospels didn't exist until 10 years after Paul's death.
Well, the beast created in Rome runs a tight ship.
He does, man. You know, what's amazing, though, is really how far Satan has fallen off his game. I mean, if you look at Christianity, it was a fairly decent lie. There was enough truth mixed into the lies that the counterfeit could appear credible if you were not thoughtful. If you were ignorant and just a believer, then the lies of Christianity appeared credible. In Islam, by the time he made that religion, there is nothing that is even remotely credible. I mean, that's just
wasn't even trying.
Oh my God, it's a pile of Huey. But now he's got Trump, and he's working through Trump, and it's just so stupid. It hurts. You would expect that Satan working through Trump would occasionally say something that was sane, so it would make the rest of his lies somewhat credible. But boy, they are really off their game. Either that or they're thinking we're just going to prove to God that people are useless because we're going to fool them with the worst diatribes ever.
Well, if you look back through the Dark Ages, you see a church that's forced to go to church every Sunday. If you didn't, you were a heretic burned at the stake. They read them to you in Latin, and a lot of people probably didn't understand Latin at the time. So they were just sitting there, okay, we're here trying not to get killed.
Right.
And that indoctrination was solid, and it continued. The whole momentum of it has just kept going ever since.
Yeah, they kept on saying that anybody that challenged the church was tortured to death. And that happens to be an incentive for most people. Mm-hmm. So that was the whole thing. This is the, if you ever wanted proof that there is no such thing as an Osama that's functioning amongst most people, the keyboard jihadist happened to be it. This keyboard jihadist is promoted on my Facebook feed, so that Facebook must think, the AIs at Facebook that created his promotion must think that he is worth watching. And he is, it's just one utterly ridiculous scene after another that bears zero correlation to reality. Always a little Israeli flag there in the middle of the ruins, though. So, it must be Israel that just got pounded. And this moron smirks in the background. And you just wonder, what is it with Facebook that your algorithms are so stupid? Your AI is so inept that it promotes this kind of rot. And what is it about a Muslim that thinks I can show this kind of trash and that I'm not going to lose credibility?
Well, I watched it and I couldn't understand a word he was saying, and the script, the translation underneath it didn't make any sense. It's like he took some inspiration from his Rahab in the confabulation that it looked like it was to me. It was totally disjointed.
Yes, well, it's the nature of Islam. It's the nature of AI today. It's the nature of social media. It is literally walking into an anti-Semitic cesspool of confabulation. It's just, I mean, that's why I left Facebook and why I left X, is that if you play in that arena, the majority of which are going to be served up by the algorithms is religious rot like this, and it's just stinks to high hell. You know, there's it's hard not to retreat to the dumb blonde when you see this, and that's unfair. I really got nothing against blondes, and I've dated a lot of brilliant blondes in my day, but that is how the two women that are the head of the EU have got to be the most ignorant, irrational, immoral people on the planet. And to think that the European Union is comprised of sufficient people of low intellect and morality that they would support them. Now, here she's saying the EU should humiliate itself by seeking to talk with Russia. Killer Careless doesn't want to have a discussion with a country that is kicking Europe's behind, that was the savior of Europe when it supplied cheap oil, but now the European economies are all trashed because you won't buy the cheap oil, and you continue to spend hundreds of billions that you don't have, and weapon systems that hardly work, and you continue to double down on the war that you helped start against Russia on immoral grounds, and you won't even talk to Russia? And that's humiliating to, I would imagine that she trying to talk to Putin, she'd be humiliated. That's probably true. But you don't announce it publicly.
I think there are two things at play here. The first one is they just don't like Russia. And Russia's been an enemy of that area for a long time, and that's how they think of it. The other part of it is they want this war to continue as long as possible. They do not want a ceasefire. They do not want a resolution. They want the conflict there because, in a way, it has boosted their economy. Their military-industrial complexes are up and running now, and they're getting massive influxes of money still coming in from other places, from what I understand. So this is a scheme that's designed into perpetuity unless something happens. It's going to continue on and grow until there's a catastrophic event.
Yeah, I think that's partially true. The first part is true. But what the first part misses is this. Germany was the enemy for that part of the world, but Germany is no longer perceived as the enemy because Germany is no longer a Marxist, socialist, Nazi country. So the Germans are not hated, even though the Germans, as National Socialists, butchered Europe. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. After the German Nazis butchered Europe, the Russian Marxists of the Soviet Union butchered Europe, didn't they? But the Russians are no longer Marxists. So why is it that the Europeans still hate the Russians, even though they're not tied to the doctrine that caused them to be vicious, when they incorporate the Germans, when they were actually more vicious under Marxism than the Russians were, because they're no longer Marxist, socialist, fascists. So we have a double standard here. So there's not, I think the problem shouldn't be Russia. The problem should have been communism. And yet they all leaned towards communism. And the Russians today aren't communists. So to hate them is to be trapped in a mindset where you don't understand the power of political doctrines.
Right. Well, that's all true. But I still think there's a conflict there because Russia has things that the EU wants. They want Kaliningrad. They want total control of the Baltic Sea. They want the minerals and the other things that they have in Russia, the oil especially that they have. So that creates a jealousy.
Just black down greed. Yeah, Russia has always had huge influence in the Baltic. And so that's not going to change, and to want it otherwise is ridiculous. And to fight a proxy war against a country because you want to steal their assets, well, that makes you Trumpian. That makes you evil. Now, as it relates to the benefit for the economy, no, there's no benefit for the economy. The European economies have been trashed over this. And the Europeans really don't have a military-industrial complex. They are completely impotent militarily. That's why they're begging even Donald Trump to stay in NATO, is they just don't have a military capability. You look at the UK, even though the UK was on the winning side of the last World War, they didn't recover from it. There's essentially no military in the UK. There's essentially no military among the Germans or the French. They also would lose to the Houthis. So the reason that they want war to continue is that all of the Marxist leaders of the European Union know that even with Marxist youth, they're so unpopular, their popularity ratings are so low that there isn't a boogeyman out there and a war they can talk about they're the buffer against, they're out of power. It's their last cling to political power, and they would rather destroy their people and their future than lose power. And if you started to negotiate with the Russians and you stopped arming the Ukraine and the war ended, they'd all be proven to be complete liars, and they wouldn't survive that politically. What do you have there next, Kevin? Killer careless.
Killer drones.
Yeah, this is something that bothers me a great deal. Yeah, you probably go back to the time that the first drones were used by the United States to go off and kill people extrajudiciously, where without trial, without evidence, without conviction, without them even perpetrating a crime against America, American presidents used drones to go off and kill people around the world. And it was flat out murder. We killed tens of thousands of people without trial, without evidence, without any conviction or indictment. And what I said at the time is that now that we have drones, wars are going to become far more common. They're going to be easier to start, but impossible to end. And I think that's half the problem that I wanted to talk about here. The other is that Israel has just doubled down on its F-35 squadrons, buying more of them, claiming that they're going to be military independent by buying of course, a plane that can only be maintained by the United States. Stupid as that is, the United States and Israel are both now trapped in the same loop, and the loop they're trapped in is the last war. They're both thinking that because they have militaries that are manned aircraft and large ships, that they have a powerful military that will prevail against any opponent. And what they do not understand is that war will never be fought again. The war now is drones and missiles, and the United States and Israel are in the dark ages in this pursuit. And I'm here to tell you that a swarm of inexpensive drones will outperform any manned aircraft and any tank or any ship. So, you can get millions of them for the price of one ship or one aircraft, and they'll outperform it every time. So, Israel is fighting the wrong war, and what they should have realized is that after 10/7, Alaska Flood 1.0, where their Apache gunships were useless, their Warthog gunships were useless. The Apache gunships were also useless. Their tanks were completely useless. Their F-35s and F-15s were useless. Their entire war apparatus was rendered completely inept by jihadis in tennis shoes. And these jihadis in tennis shoes wreaked havoc in Israel. And the next time, according to the prophets, they're going to come in nearly 1,000-fold. And Israel continues to double down and spend its money on war systems that will have absolutely no effect on them. It will be as useless as they were 2.5 years ago. That's what I say. What do you guys think?
Well, you can't get a better ROI than a drone.
Yes.
They're out there everywhere. And what you're seeing in Ukraine is people are starting to move underground. They're living in subway tunnels, they're living in basements and stuff, and not coming out unless they absolutely have to. The only thing that makes these drones the least bit vulnerable is that they're noisy. As soon as they make a noise-free drone, it'll be real tough to get along. It kind of reminds me of the first scene in The Terminator, where everybody lives underground and the hunter-killer drones are roaming around outside.
Yeah, exactly. And they're driven by AI, which is the Terminator proved prophetic. Yeah, and James Cameron, by the way, knows it. That it has proved prophetic. It's exactly what has what occurred. They have drones that are so sophisticated, and the nice thing about this, that's nothing nice, but the sophistication is easily replicated. Once you come up with the technology for avoiding a GPS jamming, for example, by switching to surface feature recognition, sometimes tethering them on fiber optics. Each time that there is a new generation that avoids the countermeasures, the replication of it is software and very, very inexpensive electronics. And so you can adapt your drone and your defenses for drones very, very quickly if that's your mindset, and you have people that are devoted to doing it. Israel and the U.S. do not. Russia, Ukraine, and Iran, China, for example, do. And so if the United States or Israel were to fight Russia or China, it would be an annihilation. And that's why the United States cannot prevail in Iran. There's a 0% chance that the U.S. could ever, even no matter how much effort is put into it or how long the battle goes, the U.S. can't prevail. We've moved on. The world has moved on to an entirely different kind of warfare. And the slaggards are Israel and the United States.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't seen. I mean, Ukraine has definitely been the headline grabber for the commercial grade drone war that's going on there. I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of it used by Hezbollah. Gaza, Hamas they're too blockaded. They can still get stuff in and out, weapons and things, but I think they have a tough time getting some of that technology into Gaza. But I'm surprised that Hezbollah has not really been sending drone swarms and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you got to keep up there, Mr. Kevin. What Hezbollah has done is they're still sending rockets into Israel. But since the Jews have come into Lebanon with tanks and convoys, the new drones that they have, and they're plentiful, they're wrecking havoc with the Israeli military. They're taking out their tanks. They're taking out their personnel carriers. They're hunting individual IDF soldiers. The drones for Hezbollah have been exceedingly effective, but they're all used in close combat. So Israel was ill prepared. It went into Lebanon thinking, more of the same, and it's been badly beaten. It's just that Israel no longer reports on war casualties. So you only know it through the alternative media. You don't know it through Israel. They don't report on their own anymore. But the Hezbollah is a drone army now.
Wow.
Yep.
Well,
even in Ukraine, they've created a drone industry that's so large, they're now exporting them to other countries in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them aren't coming into Hezbollah's hands.
Yeah, they're coming into, you take a country like Saudi Arabia that has hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. weapons, but no one to use them. And they're now trying to do deals with Ukraine for drones, but it's the same situation. They got no one to use them. So I don't know what the advantage is for the world, but I can tell you that the armies of drones, swarms of drones, are far more of a concern to the world than is the deployment of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, that I would concur. Nukes do not keep me up at night. They do not scare me. Fiber optic controlled drones makes me want to sell my buckshot and go get more birdshot.
Yeah, it's a really serious problem. It's a privacy issue too. What else do you have there, Kevin?
Okay, we're real close to an hour. We're going to make this our last one.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go past him. I think I had one on Ruth. Let's see. This is the.
Yeah, we can go back to Ruth.
Okay. Yeah. There it is. Ruth. The reason I wanted to end on this is that I'm getting a lot of things on my feed now, which means that Facebook is spying on me on Ruth. I mean, what that means is that Facebook is spying on me. That's all that means. And that's what these social media companies do, is they spy on you. Ruth is one of those stories that the religious just cannot process. It is the ultimate story on the deliverance of the Kinsman Redeemer. Now, depending on if it's Jewish a site or a Christian site, they want to produce Ruth differently. If it is a Jewish site, they're going to present Boaz as the good Jew who is accommodating of a goy and shows righteousness by treating a goy well. If it is a Christian site, it is a woman of faith who finds redemption. But Ruth didn't have any faith, and she did not need or find redemption. And
he was, yeah.
And Ruth is happens to be Dode's great grandmother. And so if she is going to be viewed as goy, then you got a problem with with King Dode, don't you? Because the mother is supposed to be the way that you mark who is who, and you don't know his birth mother, but you know she is a Moabite. And Moab, of course, means who's your father. But the reality is, if you want to pretend to be like ethnically special Jews, you need to understand that 100% of the breeding stock of Jews is Babylon, 100% of it. And the Moab, who's your father, who's your daddy, is born of incest with Lot's daughters taking advantage of their father, and Lot, and therefore his daughters, were as Babylonian as Abraham and Sarah. So there's no genealogical difference here. So you can't condemn Ruth that she's a goyim where the Jews are pure and somehow special. No, you can't do that. And second, what Ruth has got going for is courage and wisdom, and conviction. She knows exactly who she is. She has the single best damn speech in all of the Torah and prophets. So all the boys with all their long-winded speeches, it's Ruth who nails it. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. I go where you go. That's the best speech in the entirety of it. Doesn't get any better than that. Unless it's when Boaz asks, who are you? And he says, I'm your Amma. I'm going to deliver your kinsman redeemer. And she did. Dode, when he served as the kinsman redeemer in 33 CE, Ruth was his mother. Boaz was his father. One of the most important prophecies in all of the Torah, and it's all set up. And the Ruth and Boaz story, that is the greatest love story maybe ever written, certainly the greatest love story pursuant to God. And they are the ultimate power couple. It does not get better than those two. And in Judaism, it's completely missed. Oh, they love Esther, and Esther is not even a real person. The whole story about Esther is fake historically. And they love her, but they hate Ruth. And they hate Ruth's roots, which come through Leah. They hate Leah too. They love the idolatrous Rachel. Yeah. They're just horrible.
Well, Ruth is the epitome of a strong woman. I mean,
yeah. And
her story is remarkable.
She was a woman who had it all together. She knew she could catch Boaz's eye. She knew exactly how to catch his interest too. First of all, Boaz had already known her a couple of thousand years by that time. So when she said was going to introduce herself to Boaz said, listen, your reputation precedes you. I know exactly who you are. But she knew that if she went into the corner of his field and worked, didn't ask for anybody's help. I'm going to go in there and roll up my sleeves. I'm going to harvest, playing by the rules in the corner of that field. And I'm going to bring what I gleaned from that field to Naomi, who is a legend in these parts, that I'll catch the eye of the unofficial mayor of Bethlehem, who owns that field, because he admires people that work. And she knew she was hot. She wasn't just smart, she was beautiful. And she caught Boaz's eye. And Boaz knew her so well, the first thing he said, don't anybody criticize this woman. She'll go off. Do not do that. Do not demean her. Do not get in her way. He knew that personality intimately and had a whole speech. And then when she goes in to close the deal with Boaz, she knew that she would find Boaz out working with his men and that they would have a lovely dinner celebrating the harvest. And this was the Shabuw'ah harvest now, because she started with him during the Bakurim harvest, and now she was at the wheats harvest on Shabuw'ah. She knew exactly where she'd find him, out working with the men, and they would have a lovely dinner and celebrate this, and that Boaz would be the guy that was working out there with his men, and he would retire after the dinner that he celebrated with his men, and he would be on the threshing floor. And he was. And she went right there. She snuggled up next to him, took a little bit of his cloak and pulled it over him, because she's trying to tell you, oh, by the way, Boaz is Noach, and I know it. I was married to him too. And he asked, who are you? And she says, I am your Amma, which means productive mother. Now, do you think that Ruth was Boaz's mother?
No.
Of course not. Of course not. But she says, I'm your Amma, and she says it twice. And no one understands why she says that. And then she says to him, I'm going to deliver your Kinsman Redeemer, which means she's going to give birth to Dod, the Kinsman Redeemer. And she is going to be the Amma for what Israel is supposed to represent. She is the mother of the covenant family of Israel. She is the mother of Dod when it mattered in 33 CE. And she tells Boaz all of this prophetically. There's just no story that compares to it. And you don't have a single religious scholar, Christian or Jewish, that can figure it out.
Yeah, it's all about getting the land back. It's all about trading shoes and getting the land back, isn't it? That's all their focus is on in it. Their deal is they want to talk about the tradition of taking off the sandal and who has the rights to the land and who is a Jew and who is a goy and what's a woman who has no rights because her husband has died. They don't get it. I mean, it's a beautiful story of how Boaz says, I'm not going to jump to conclusions here. We're going to play this by the rules. I understand the rights that go on with pursuant to the land. I understand the teachings of the Torah pursuant to a woman who has become a widow. And so I'm going to listen to God. I know what he has to say about these things. We're going to play this out as we should, but I also know how this is going to play out. That woman's going to be my wife. And we are going to deliver the Kinsman Redeemer. And Boaz became one of the two columns of the temple. Yeah.
You think it's just because somebody thought, hey, Boaz sounds like a nice name?
Right. Strength. Yeah. Good name for a column, right?
Yeah, with strength. And Dod, when he's writing the Mizmor, goes to Yahowah and says, oh, thank you for sending your Amma. She's the Amma. Thank you for sending your Amma. Without you having sent your Amma, I would have had no chance to resolve my conflict. and they can't put all that together. We are headed towards a translation. I've got to finish what I'm doing in preparing the books for unpublication, if you will, on the site. I've got the first 1/3 done. I've got the other 2/3 to work out. I'm working that with Perry to get some of the superscripts done and get the chapterization and pagination right on them. And then we're going to put them on the site so they can be read and they can be searched, and the Ask AI can go through them as well. And as soon as we do that and we work our way up to the point of this story, which will be fairly soon, then I'm going to spend the next month doing nothing but translating and providing insights on the story of Ruth. But I've already come to see it as the most wonderful love story. It's the epitome of life in the covenant. This is precisely what Yahowah had in mind, and he has played this story out now 6 times already. 2 times more to go.
Looking forward to that.
Understand? Yeah, you want to understand the covenant? It's all laid out for you in the story provided by Ruth and Boaz.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the most amazing stories in the Torah.
Yes.
Rabbis can't deal with it, so they shelve it.
Right. It's interesting where it follows. Of course, you have the 5 books of the Torah, and then you have Yahowah, who was Moshe's successor, and then you have the book of Shaphat, the judges and their period. It's the next book, and it sets up everything else. There is no meeting with Shamuel. Shamuel doesn't go from judge to prophet. The anointer of Dot. None of it happens had it not been for Ruth and Boaz. They set it all up. The transition from the Exodus and all of the horror that Jews put Yahowah through, that transition is provided by this woman and her husband. Just not appreciated to the degree that they need to be, and you don't need to appreciate them for their sake. You need to appreciate them for your sake. Without them,
you got to understand.
Yeah, right. Without them, you can't have a relationship with Yahowah. They enabled that process. There are certain stories that are essential. The way that God chooses to work through people, the way he worked through these two on and off through time, is what makes the covenant possible. It makes it possible to know Yahowah. It makes it possible for the Kinsman Redeemer to be delivered and prevail. You don't think there's a chance that Dod, who in the life of the shepherd boy, who constantly was running away from Saul, constantly in fear of Saul, then running from the Philistines, then running to the Philistines, then running away from his own son, and then running away from God. You think there's any chance that that same man, after all of that, is going to be delivered in 2 BCE, and that he, on his own recognizance, is going to say, yeah, I'm going to man up. I'm going to go right for this Passover crucifixion thing, and then I'll journey into hell for a heavenly cause. No problem. I'm on it. You think that maybe he had some help, like a real mother and father, to make that possible?
Yeah.
Gotta think it through as to what it is that provided the character, the judgment, the discernment, the motivation for Dod in that life, for him to see it through. That was a big ask. It didn't happen by chance.
No. Well, it probably wouldn't have happened if translations hadn't been done properly and the proper connections made, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's correct. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. I know we went a little over twice the length of our intended 30 minutes, but we got both some Torah teaching and news in. It was great to have you, Roger. We'll have you be a regular rotating guest throughout this process, and it's fun to do the blog on the blog just as a daily show to talk about events in the news, talk about Torah, talk about what we're doing, where we're going, and what time it is. We're only now we're less than 3 weeks from the beginning of the time of trouble.
Yep.
So, Always a pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.